Hi there, my name is Roxane Webster.
And I'm Keith Alba.
We are the owners and partners of my home team at Keller Williams Advantage, and this is the Honest Hour.
Yes, it is. Yet again, another version, another episode.
Where we provide a spin-free environment.
Other than Rox's, whirly-dirly chair there. But in terms of the information and the conversations we're going to have, it's transparent, see-through, honest, and just kind of giving you our take of some local news and events that are kind of happening and how they affect the real estate market.
Mm-hmm. And today, what else is there to talk about but interest rates?
Right. It's all over every news channel, every talk show, radio you talk about, all that kind of good stuff. Everyone's talking the Fed, the Fed, the Fed.
Yeah. And, I think that there is kind of a misconception that when the Fed raises rates, that they are raising mortgage interest rates. And mortgage interest rates are certainly impacted by the Fed rates, but they're not the same rate. Do you want to explain that a little bit for us?
Yeah, sure. When they're talking about the Fed fund rate, things along those lines, what they're talking about is kind of that bank intra-lending or government intra-lending interest rates that are out there. Not necessarily the interest rates that you're going to get on a mortgage for, say, a purchase or a refinance. Now, when we're talking those interest rates, we're talking the first loan, right? If you get a home equity line or something along those lines, they may be more tied directly to those Fed fund rates because it's tied to, say, the LIBOR or some of those interbanking, it's LIBOR plus X% usually. So that may be affected, just like your credit card interest rates are going to be affected by the Fed funds rate going up. But in regards to mortgage interest rates and those Fed funds, it's not a direct correlation. They seem to move together, at the same time. So we are seeing the mortgage interest rates rise, and just happened again today, huh, Rox?
Yep. And, I think, too, that what a lot of people don't realize is that most of the time the mortgage industry listens to the same chatter we do. And they don't want to have to pick up the phone and tell somebody that the rates went up a point overnight. So how they usually handle this internally is that they, when they anticipate that the Fed is going to raise the rates, they start incrementally raising the mortgage interest rate so that it isn't such a big hit. So we've already been seeing some of these increases baked into the loans that we're getting quoted. So
that's true.
What does this mean, right? I think that we've gotten used to a world where interest rates were below 6% and for the past few years below 3%, right? But God, my mother, I think her first home loan was at 16%. She would have killed for a 10, right?
Yeah.
So my first counsel is the sky is not falling.
Right. It's just getting a little bit more expensive to borrow money, but that expense is relatively speaking to the last few years, right? It's historically, as Rox was saying, interest rates have been really high before, and then they got down to historic lows. And now we're just kind of crawling back out of that basement of those, bottoms of the interest rates for the mortgages that are there. Where they settle, I don't know. How's your crystal ball looking today, Rox?
My crystal ball is foggy as it has been since the beginning. But we do have some data, right? I'm going to show you. This is some historical data. This right here, I love this. This data. What this shows, Keith, is the national trend line of interest of appreciation, home appreciation since the 90s, right? But you go back to the 60s, you're not going to see much change in this trend line. If you take the good years, the bad years, the recessions, the booming markets, on average, homes have appreciated at a rate of around 4% per year. Right. Now you can see in the early 2000s that went way above that trend line, and then we saw right after it we had the Great Recession. right? So when we ask ourselves, why are the interest rates being hiked right now? They're being hiked because we want to keep out of this type of a range. And if you can see this, the proof is on the pudding. I mean, here we saw the appreciation drop in the Great Recession. And really last year, 2021, we only just caught up to that trend line since the Great Recession. So but it's starting to head above that trend line. So when the Fed is increasing the interest rates, what they're trying to do is just cool the top of the market a little bit, just a little bit. And in a later vid, we're going to go over what's happening with market conditions right now. But the other data that we look at when kind of comparing this situation to the past is this one here, which is mortgage rates, as everybody is, out breathing in a paper bag, trying to calm down over these interest rates. This right here gives us a picture of interest rates back to the 70s. And as you can see, we have only ever dipped below 6% interest rate, with the exception of a few months right before the Great Recession, at the beginning of the 2000s. It's been 1972 since we were below 6%. And you can see directly that these interest rate drops here below 6% were in response first to the Great Recession. And why does the Fed do that? Why do they drop interest rates when we're in economic trouble? That might be a good tidbit, Keith.
Yeah. Well, the Feds, I mean, they're charged with the economy, right? And keeping an eye on that. And as inflation starts creeping up, and as we've been hearing throughout the news, I mean, we've peaked or hit all-time highs over the last 4 decades or something here recently in terms of the inflation costs. Inflation is making everything more expensive. You're feeling that at the gas pump right now in terms of your consumables like groceries, all that sort of stuff.
That's
You're
right.
seeing these price increases that are happening in there. And so the Fed's increased the interest rates in order to kind of cool down that economy, to bring down those costs, right? So the economy isn't booming as much. There's not as much inflation that's out there. And so this is in direct response to that.
And the reason that works, right? Because that's counterintuitive, isn't it? That if all of our rates our costs for everything are higher, we would increase the cost of things. The reason for it is that the rate is the rate that you pay when you borrow other people's money to buy things. So by making money more expensive, we're cooling down or reducing the number of people who will borrow that money. And presumably that means there will be fewer people out there buying stuff, which will start putting some downward pressure on those things that right now the prices are going up to a large degree because there's so many people grappling for a limited number of resources.
Right. Yeah. It's back to the old supply and demand, right? The demand is really high. And so that creates opportunities out there in the market, which brings businesses in, therefore potentially increasing the supplies. And so these costs just start going up. Well, if new businesses can get access to relatively cheap money, that means there's just going to be more people bringing in the increasing, the consumers are pushing the demand, and the response is to try and bring more supply. Well, now as the cost of borrowing money is increasing, that's going to limit the amount of players or maybe the expansion that businesses experience, which is going to obviously affect demand for the consumers, which is going to affect the pricing and put kind of downward pressure on the overall economy. I mean, that's the gist of it. The trick to it all is, where do we stop, right? What's the part where the rates are too high and now all of a sudden it's causing a recession, right? Now all of a sudden we're going backwards rather than seeing high GDP and all this businesses and inflation and peaking. If we go too far, if the Feds go too far, then all of a sudden now we're in the exact opposite, and the opposite of a booming economy is the recession that's there. And so all eyes on the Fed is, when do they stop? How aggressive are they going to get with these interest rates, these hikes? And at what point do they say, okay, I think we've done enough to kind of settle down that inflation, but haven't gone too far to kind of create that recessionary pressures.
That is such a good point. And, you know, when I think about these type of Fed Reserve moves, right, a lot of this inflation that we've had has been because we saw the interest rates dropped below 3% so low in response to COVID, right? And I almost have this vision of these mad scientists with interest rates here and inflation in that pile, and trying to. But when we think about the United States economy, is like the largest ocean liner, an ocean liner the size of New York, and trying to turn that ocean liner on a dime. There's no such thing. So the Fed does their best bet at what their adjustment of these interest rates are going to do. And it's almost guaranteed that to an extent they're going to get it wrong, right? They dropped it below 3% at the beginning of COVID and it overheated our economy. If they raise the interest rates too high, it'll underheat our economy. So
I think what ultimately we see, Rox, is the statistics nerds call it a reversion to the mean, right? And we're seeing that, we saw that with that appreciation for sure, right? So back in the early 2000s, all of a sudden the appreciation surpassed that 4% average or the mean that was there. And so what happened was a reversion to the mean. Now that reversion happened a little bit more steeply, so it dropped down. But then as you start going into 2010 and moving on, all of a sudden you see that appreciation crawling back up towards that mean line, that 4%. Now we've overcome it a little bit. And so there may be a little bit of pullback, but if you look back again, it took 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years before it actually dropped back down to that mean line that's there.
That's
so
right.
Overall, and you're seeing the same thing with the interest rates, right? All of a sudden that 6% average over the last 30 years, it dropped below that. And now we're absolutely climbing back up towards that 6-7% number.
I think that the important thing to keep in mind with this, and we're going to talk about this in another video as well, is that one thing my crystal ball does tell me is that the overriding economic impact right now is our inventory, right? When we look at cooling the top of the market, that's exactly that, cooling the top of the market, but that's not likely to drop the prices. That's just likely you may go from 12 or 14 or 16% annual appreciation to 4% appreciation. And guess what? From this person's point of view, that's really good news. That appreciation, this appreciation is not sustainable.
And what it tells me, Rox, is that real estate, whether it's a primary or an investment property or any of that kind of stuff, still has the opportunity to be good returns, right? So if it's a long-term investment, right, you're going to get into it, you're going to hold it. Average from NAR, I think now is saying 7 to 10 years that people are staying in there. Over that time period, the average is you're probably going to see a 4% appreciation per year from the time that you buy it. Now, there may be some dips, there may be some drops, but ultimately, again, if it's a long-term investment for you, you're going to see appreciation in that asset. And because you're also making mortgage payments, some of that is being applied to the principal, you're getting a principal reduction, and it just kind of compounds that equity. So appreciation is going up, your principal amount is going down, and that is building equity. So real estate,
and the interest rates are still at a 40-year low.
Exactly. So all in all, it's still a good time to buy, especially if you're looking to hold a long-term asset like real estate. Let us know how we can help. We're happy to guide you through this market and kind of put you onto the properties and get you under contract.
Excellent. Thank you.
See you next time. And remember, if you like our videos, go down, click that subscribe button, hit the bell so you get notifications when the new ones come out, and we'll see you on the next one.
All right.